temple had been rebuilt, the sacrifices had returned. The priests still stood at the altar. The people still called themselves faithful from the outside. Everything appeared normal, but heaven saw something different. The fire still burned upon the altar, yet the hearts that gathered around it had grown cold. Then, one final prophet stepped into history, not to announce another kingdom, not to reveal another vision, but to ask one devastating question: what happens when people continue the rituals after they've forgotten the reason? Welcome to Code of Scripture. Today, we arrive at the final book of the Old Testament. For centuries, prophets had warned kings, spoken against empires, foretold exile, promised restoration. Now the people were home. The temple stood once more. But something invisible had been lost. This is Malachi, the last messenger. Malachi speaks to a generation unlike those before them. They had inherited peace. They had inherited worship. They had inherited scripture. They did not remember slavery. They did not witness Jerusalem burning. They did not survive exile. Instead, they inherited routine. Religion had become ordinary. The temple was no longer miraculous. It had become familiar, and familiarity can quietly destroy wonder. The priests performed sacrifices. The songs were still sung. The incense still rose, yet heaven declared, "I have no pleasure in this." Not because the rituals were wrong, because the hearts behind them had drifted away. The people brought offerings, but not their best. They brought blind animals, lame animals, diseased animals, things they themselves no longer wanted. Then they placed them before God. Malachi asks a question filled with irony. Would you offer this to your governor? Would your king accept such a gift? The issue was never livestock. It was value. Whatever people value most receives their best. Whatever they no longer value receives whatever remains. The prophet exposes a dangerous habit. People often give God their leftovers, their leftover time, their leftover attention, their leftover intention, their leftover devotion. The altar had become a place of convenience, not reverence. Previous prophets fought visible idols, golden calves, stone statues, wooden images. Malachi confronts something harder to recognize: invisible idols, comfort, routine, cynicism, spiritual exhaustion. The people still believed, but they no longer expected. They still worshipped, but they no longer wondered. They still prayed, but they had stopped listening. Perhaps the greatest idol is not another God. It is indifference, when nothing is openly rejected, but nothing is deeply loved. Then Malachi introduces one of Scripture's most beautiful images: a refiner's fire. Ancient goldsmiths heated precious metals until every impurity rose to the surface. Again and again and again, until only pure gold remained. The process looked destructive, but its purpose was restoration. Fire does not always exist to destroy. Sometimes it exists to reveal. Malachi declares that God is like a refiner, not interested in burning people away, but burning away everything hiding their true nature. The furnace is not punishment. It is purification. The question becomes, when life grows hot, what rises to the surface? Fear, bitterness, pride, or something eternal? Then comes one of the quietest mysteries in Scripture. Malachi describes a book of remembrance, a record kept before God, not of achievements, not of wealth, not of influence, but of those who continued seeking Him, even when the world around them had grown cold. Imagine that, while empires recorded battles, heaven recorded faithfulness, while kings counted armies. God remembered ordinary people, conversations, acts of kindness, moments no one else noticed. The Book of Remembrance reminds us, nothing done with sincerity is ever truly forgotten. History remembers the powerful, heaven remembers the faithful. Then darkness begins to lift. Malachi gives one final promise. The Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings, not lightning, not conquest, not another empire, a sunrise, light appearing quietly over the horizon, healing. Arriving gradually, the image is extraordinary. The longest night always ends the same way, not through force, but through dawn. The prophet is no longer speaking only to his own generation. He is looking towards someone still to come, someone who will bring healing instead of fear, light instead of shadow, hope instead of silence. Then Malachi speaks of another messenger, someone who will prepare the way, someone carrying the spirit of Elijah. The road is being prepared. History is holding its breath. The final words of the Old Testament are not about endings, they are about expectation. A promise hangs in the air, then the voice disappears. The prophets fall silent, the heavens become quiet. Not for days, not for years, for nearly 4 centuries. Generation after generation would wait. Many would wonder if God had stopped speaking forever. But silence is not absence. Sometimes silence is preparation. Malachi leaves us with a question. What happens when faith becomes routine? When worship becomes habit? When wonder slowly fades into obligation? Perhaps every generation must answer that question for itself. The temple may stand, the rituals may continue, the words may still be spoken, but if the heart grows cold, the fire upon the altar cannot warm it. The final prophet reminds us that heaven has never desired empty performance, only honest devotion. The messenger finished speaking, the scroll was closed, the Old Testament reached its final page. Then, nothing. 400 years of silence, until one day, a voice cried out in the wilderness, but that belongs to another archive. This has been a Mysterious Encounters entry into the code of Scripture. The archive is never closed, even when heaven appears silent.